It says it's started.
There we go. Now it says it started. Okay.
Okie dokie. So first, I think we just want to go through what we have open on user lose it. So I was just going to share the GitHub. Is that okay, Martin?
I think it's the right way to do it. I did a little bit of work on it yesterday, and apparently Elliot did as well. But it's late for Elliot, so.
Yeah. All right. Where do we want to start? Issues or PRs?
Let's do the issues. I think that's probably the best. And some of these we might just decide not to do.
Okay. Newest to oldest or other way around?
Let's do the first one because I've actually got something to ask on that one.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so Elliot points to the middle boxes stuff and the crypto stuff in the document and sort of, okay, so he has two concerns, facile and superfluous. We may disagree on the first point, but I do agree on the second point. And so I've cut that down quite a lot in the pull request that I've got there. One of the things that sort of came out of the discussion with Tolis about this one was that this is probably just a distraction from the central theme. I think there's an important point to make, which is to recognize that middle boxes are participants in the protocols, even if you don't want them to be. And you have to engage with that fact. But that's the only point that we really need to make.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you actually need the term middle boxes all. So there are protocols which have multi parties, more than two at least. And there are also some parties which are just participating unintendedly. So that's what we need to say, I think.
Yeah. And that's what the pull request essentially does, is it takes the one little snippet that says that and leaves only that in the text, and then cuts down the remainder of the, actually cuts out the cryptography section entirely. I think there's a paragraph in the security considerations that talks about that now. So, whoop, delete.
Yeah, that's it. Cool.
All right, so David's got a point here. I haven't read that yet.
Even
I'm sleeping.
Protocols can involve more actors than the current.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the text I wrote, but I think having something in that direction of like, because that's what we had in the previous text of, even if you intend it to be for two parties, they might not be, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, I see. Well, but I mean, is that not kind of the point being brought up by the fact that simple protocols can involve more actors than is immediately apparent? Or is that not?
There's a difference between is apparent and intent, I guess.
Anyway, let's work on David's text there, and but the question that I have is this the general direction worth taking?
So are you not?
I agree with the general direction.
Yeah, definitely. Are you not talking about encryption or cryptography anymore at all, basically?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. I guess you mentioned it now only as part of. Is this part of invariance now?
No, that's the security considerations.
Security
thanks to GitHub, yeah.
Because I think that's still an important point, that in order to protect you from unintended participation, you should use encryption where possible.
Yeah, it does make that point, but it doesn't make that point as a primary thing.
I guess what is the rationale for in this PR removing that? Do you see that? Did you see that as mainly something to do with middle boxes then? I mean, I guess.
I think it just ended up being a distraction from the central point.
For me, it's quite central because that's only if you can protect the variant parts of your protocol, which is either by doing encryption or using or whatever. Actually, it makes sense to talk about invariance. If you don't have any encryption, then there's nothing you can do against ossification.
It does say that, but it also recognizes that most of the time the problems that you encounter are the things you want to talk to anyway, and that's really what I wanted to focus on. So the first sentence there from the security consideration text is cryptography can or might be used. Now I can change that to a can or some other word if you think that's more appropriate.
So I think it should be not only in the security considerations, but still in the main part of the document. But maybe it doesn't need an own section.
Yeah, I would almost be tempted, as I thought this was going to be part of before I expanded things, to even just have a mention in when we talk about invariance.
Is it really related to that, though?
Well, I mean, can you? Well, would it be meaningful really to document invariance if you didn't have a cryptographic boundary? I guess you could.
Yes, I think so.
You could have an unencrypted protocol that just is random orders of things all the time, such that people can't really ossify on them too much. It may not be but it may not be a very effective way to do it.
Yeah, I think the point of invariance is probably, and Elliot helpfully pointed this out. Going back to RFC 5704, they talked about invariance there, and one of their examples was the IP TTL and what it means. You decrement the TTL every time you forward a packet. And that's something that a lot of other capabilities in the protocol depend on. And if that invariant is not maintained, it's no longer called IP. And that's kind of central to the whole thing. And that was actually central to the debate that was had at the time of 5704 and MPLS. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think crypto fits in there.
Yeah, it's meaningful to document invariance even if there's no crypto. It's not feasible to stop someone messing with them if there's no crypto.
Right.
No, but I mean the whole point about invariants are easy because that's the part that can ossify and is ossified or whatever. But to protect the part that is variable, you need something else, and that's like, if you cannot encrypt it, then it's squeezing or use it. If you can encrypt it, then that's another way to protect some of that.
Yeah.
I think this section would have been fine. Was there actually comments on this specific section?
I can put that back. That crypto section is easy to put back.
Yeah, maybe I'm wondering, Barney, if there's another way to put it that doesn't make cryptography like the key thing that you should do, but could we instead say limit participants as a way to improve this? Cryptography is one way to do it, but another way to achieve something that can be extended is limiting participants by having it be in, like only for this particular protocol within your limited domain. That's a very popular thing these days, right? That's another way to get the same effect. Like if you're not putting it out on the open internet on open routers, you also don't have to have the same types of concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also degrees of protection, right? I mean, you can get a certain level of protection from authenticating, a certain level from authenticating and encrypting, a certain level from just telling people don't do that or we'll slap you on the wrist.
Yeah, and just to go away from this middle box theme, so it's not about limiting participation, but it's about controlling who really has access and is an active party here.
Tommy, you used the word boundary earlier. Isn't that the key point? Like
Yeah.
That's what cryptography gives you, is a boundary.
Right. So I would say, I'll add a comment for this. Can we remove this removal from this PR, but then file a new issue to say, rename cryptography section and clarify it?
Yeah. Actually, looking at the section here, I think we probably just put it back and leave it at that, unless someone's got some suggestions.
Well, I think I don't know. What do people think about kind of reframing it as put a boundary for participation as opposed to cryptography being the name.
Oh yeah, I could do that.
A boundary with
That could be a
cryptography
new
being
PR. Is what I'm saying.
a boundary with cryptography being one way of producing such
Right.
a boundary.
Yep.
That's all I wanted to figure out.
Right. So from my perspective, having gone through the issues relatively recently, a lot of the rest of these are in the too hard basket for me. So
Yeah.
let's go through some of them and see if we can work out what to do with them.
Yeah. All right. So this one we have a way forward on. That's good. More analysis needed. Okay. Concretely, what do we think should be done here, if anything?
Yeah, I'm still trying to work out what Elliot's concern is. And I haven't read his response.
Okay.
But you can always say more analysis needed on anything.
I mean, like I just had like a very quick look at this issue now, but it seems like it is kind of beyond the scope of the document. So maybe it's again just that we can remove something from the document to avoid this discussion.
It might be.
Well, so I guess which part of this is it just the fact that we're saying that it has proven to be insufficient in practice that is the problem?
I think that's probably what's going on.
Could you just relax that a little bit and say this is
Yeah.
generally commonly insufficient in practice?
Or this has, in some cases, I mean, just right. I mean, it may be sufficient some places, but the problem is it's not sufficient everywhere. Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable conclusion.
I guess he's actually picking on the word proven here.
I think so. I think that probably that's too assertive a statement to make.
Okay.
And we can just soften that statement.
All right. I'll add a comment in the issue. Okay, that should be relatively straightforward then. All right, and who's this Chris Wood guy?
Yeah, if we get a pull request, great.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
I don't
I
mean to
said,
keep filing issues without PRs. You should close this if there's no PR.
Do you expect to be able to have a moment?
Should be like a very like a 1 or 2 line change. So
You want to do it while we're on this call?
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
All right, let's do it. I'll assign you. Alrighty.
Seem to have walked right into that one.
Yep. Okay, so we have this. We did merge a PR about moving a lot of stuff to the appendix. Is there, Mary, was there more to do here? This seemed to be mainly about the examples, right?
Yeah, it was mainly about examples, and then also I thought there's a little bit more redundancy, but I didn't look at the latest version if there were more changes. The
Okay.
PR was totally fine.
Okay.
I
Do
mean,
we need to
it's-
keep this open, or I'm very happy with the action we took from this. So
Yeah. No, this is definitely a big improvement. I think the document is fine. It's just like the shorter and crisp it is, I think the better it is. So
yeah,
maybe just a final review pass at the end will help.
sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just keep it in mind.
Yep. I'm going to close that guy then.
Yeah, I found the expansion of the text on TCP to be pretty good as well.
Yeah.
That was the only part that I changed.
Okay. And get some that I had filed, and I should probably do something with. Let's see. Well, now that we're putting more examples in appendix, I think if anywhere this would belong there. I'm not super enthusiastic about this now, given how we've moved things. Does anyone have a particular opinion?
If somebody
Yeah,
wants to
I
write
think
text, we
probably.
can take it, but
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I'll do good. Great. What? I think, let's see, what was number 42? Yeah, I think now that we did some of the work on updating Greece, I'm okay with this. I think there, just for open discussion for this group, I think it'll be interesting to see how things work out with quick having Greece from the beginning versus adding stuff later. But I don't think there's going to be anything we can comment here in the document, especially now how we rephrase things to say it's just falsifying active use.
yes. Go ahead.
What do you think, Ivan?
I was going to say, welcome to the experiment. We're
Exactly.
continuing to experiment on ourselves.
And I think from this document has already changed a little bit. That at the beginning it was very focused on greasing, and now it's more focused on active use, which I think is the right thing to do. And what we say in the document is that greasing has proven to be useful for the TLS case where it was added later on, but everything else still has to be proven. So I think like that direction already changed, and this is addressed to some extent.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, for my own tracking, I'm gonna open an issue over in the EDM program side to just say like, hey, look at this, and think about it in the future. But I'm gonna close this for now.
Yeah, there's no lessons we can learn about whether greasing works or doesn't work from TLS or from initial quick deployment.
I think there were some lessons from the initial quick deployment because we literally when we added greasing we crashed one of the implementations and that got fixed before it shipped. So that's an example we can mention because that got fixed before anything hit production.
I don't know if that belongs in this doc though, is what I'm thinking, right? Like I think that is a very interesting point, and I want to talk about that more with this group, particularly about like how do we, what type of testing and deployment do we do before we ship the protocol?
It's maybe just saying we should apply greasing, in this document, maybe just being clear, you should start greasing even before the initial versions, before the final RFC, do it even when you're developing.
Yeah, but I mean, using greasing as a debugging tool and actually building greasing into the protocol is two different things, I think.
Yeah, there was talk, I wasn't following it that closely, but there was talk about ossification on draft versions of Quick as well. So maybe the lesson is start this from the very early drafts, not don't try and add it just before the RFC is published.
Right. I think that's a great thing to do, and I just capture. I'm typing in those notes into the issue on kind of our program side. And I'm worried about bloat on this one, and I think there's a lot of work we can still do talking about how do we do the deployment of a protocol within a group.
Fair enough. That makes sense to me.
Totally agree.
Presence owner. Okay, great. So we are here, and I think, yeah, coordination. I think this again is going to be something that's going to be more general. So I'm happy to essentially move that over.
Yeah. One of the things that we've sort of discovered is that you don't get to do any of this without having a community of people who actively maintain the protocol and are willing to do things to fix it and improve it. And that's maybe a little bit outside the scope of this work. But
yeah, no, I think we can do follow-on discussions, but we're still learning there. I don't think we know what to say concretely. All right, getting a bit older now. Correct or fail? Yeah. Yeah, again, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, I think we've tried a couple of things that work this way, and it's actually a pretty cool design technique, particularly once you have crypto in the mix. And this is one of those things that we sort of did in Quick to some extent with the way that we did address validation for the handshake. There's no additional overhead. You just encrypt the packets, and if they don't decrypt, then it wasn't legitimate, and that just sort of falls out by virtue of tying into other things. But it's a design technique. It's not really central to this, and so I think that I don't think we need to mention it.
Yeah, not sure if it's a distraction, but now that we have kept the section on cryptography, we could just add a sentence there.
Yeah, but then it is a distraction, I think, ultimately. Yeah. There's a lot you can talk about in this space, and mostly it's just, well, here's a trick. Look at this. Isn't it cool? And,
right. I guess the way I would phrase it is, do we think there's anything in this section on dependency that is lacking? And I feel like this ends up just being an example of one way to achieve dependency, but given that we are moving more and more of the examples out of the text and just saying, hey, here's the principle, I'm not sure concretely what is lacking in that.
I mean, it's an example of forcing you to read the spec rather than go from TCP dump examples and guess, which is a really useful principle. I'm not sure it's necessarily for this document.
Right.
What I was thinking was more not talking about TLS specifically, but more generally having another note saying that cryptography can also help by keeping those documents, those protocols viable, because if you change keys or whatever, then you can detect things quickly.
I think there's value in the point that, forcing people to read the spec. However, if you're reading an IAB document, you're already in the reading the spec camp. So that's probably, we don't need this to be in this document if we're trying to keep it crisp and short.
Well, I mean, the audience here is more for, like, if you're designing the protocol, design your protocol in a way that you force people to read your spec instead of copying your diagrams. But I agree with your conclusion, regardless. Yeah. Yeah, I think this one just kind of park on the side. So good discussion, good thoughts, but not to be included.
To me, it does sound like an interesting enough trick that we should write it down somewhere, but maybe not in this document.
Right, right. It's like, ooh, I do appreciate it. It's very
Well, it's IAB job security while keeping some ideas for future documents to write.
Yeah. Minimum
You just
publishable unit.
volunteered to write another document. Oh, nice.
yeah.
So number 26, I've actually found through Elliot pointing at 5704 the kind of an original definition of invariance, and so David's reviewed the pull request. Number 63 talks about that, and I'm thinking that maybe that might close the loop on this one.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't intend for that to happen, but the MPLS example is
Happy accidents.
illuminating.
Which PR is that? Can you show it?
Oh,
63.
sorry. I was sharing. I'm sharing a tab, and I'm not used to Chrome, and so I was looking at it, and I didn't realize you guys couldn't see it.
Yeah, I always go with sharing window for that reason, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, it actually calls it invariance too.
Exactly. It's like, we didn't have to define this. We can just point there.
Good thing you chose the same name.
Yeah, that was purely accidental.
Yeah.
It's there.
What, you mean we found a name in networking that actually we use for the right reason? Wow.
Yeah.
Suddenly IAB document.
Capsules,
makes
packets.
sense. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a fine change. Going back to the issue then. Yeah, I think we should just reference that. Yeah. Very, very lucky you got there.
Pure dumb luck. I don't know if I don't know where the term came from originally. I think it might have been Mark Nottingham who came up with it. So maybe he had that in his mind, but yeah.
Yeah.
I need to drop, unfortunately, for the second half. Have a conflict that sprung up last minute with important people that I couldn't decide to skip. So I'm going to drop. Luckily, Eric can get people to admit people in and can handle the recording if it drops. So see y'all soon.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. And then Martin, did you just merge that other guy?
I did, and I'm closing that issue.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Good. All right.
Number 11, I think we can drop, which is RTP, RTCP. There's a whole suite of things that are in that space that if someone was willing to write something up, I'd take it. But
yeah, Colin, do you have thoughts on this area? Given
I think STP is a really good example of ossification on a terrible design.
It's all
we're not supposed to say that, though.
It's well known, I think so.
I think so, yeah. I'm not sure there's anything that's unique here that we haven't covered elsewhere.
Okay. All right. So we're happy to close. I'll do that. And then backing claims. Oh, this is old.
Yeah, I think given the amount of work that's happened here, I think we can probably just say yes.
Yeah. So I'll just summarize.
Ask for re-review. Yeah.
I'll just summarize the comment.
Yeah, I mean, we can always make sure the introduction says that, these are principles we believe are the case, and just sort of fudge it slightly.
Yeah.
It already sort of does that. So I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's one of the things that came up during the IAB open discussion, right? Of people saying like, the applicability of this to other layers, right?
This is not the first time that comment has been made, and so that's why the document has that text in there already.
Yeah, right. Predominantly the higher layers of the network stack.
I mean, this comes back to the point from earlier about people being willing to actively evolve it.
Right. Which point, Colin?
You know, these techniques make sense when people are willing to actively develop and evolve and maintain the protocol, and that's easier at certain layers of the stack than at other layers.
Right. I mean, and I do think the time scale for what it means to evolve and deploy something new is definitely different at different layers, right? Like your time scale for doing a new IP feature in routers is definitely very, very different than adding a new header in HTTP or something else. But I just don't know if it really changes what we say here.
I believe the general principle applies, that you have to use extension mechanisms actively to actually keep them viable. But the document is very focused on higher layers, and that's also very clearly stated in the document. I think that's fine.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right, so we have pull requests for a lot of these now. Oh, thank you, Chris.
There's probably examples on the IPv6 hop by hop headers and so on for the lower layers.
There is a mention of that in the document, but
already, yeah.
One of the things that we've learned from that is that we don't know the answer yet, and that's really all we can say. The debate continues.
Yep. All right.
Let's have a look at Chris's stuff.
Yeah, Chris, what'd you do? Thank you. Which these values, if this set of values.
Just tried to keep it as small as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, Martin, did you take 60 already? Or yeah, you took 60.
Yeah. Views can also vary.
But the second change, this is the part that you cut anyway, right?
Sorry, I'm not looking at the text.
It doesn't have. It doesn't have a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But it will when we merge the other one. Is what we're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's.
I think we probably dropped the second edition. What's your argument for that?
The second diff, or the second
Yeah.
green, that's actually talking about how you would change the order potentially, rather than just stating that the order does matter above. It's fine to drop.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Do not feel strongly.
So I just reviewed it and suggested you remove that and some other text as well. So I think that's probably all right.
Let me just accept those.
And then, Martin, I see you updated 62, so I'm going to go ahead and merge that then.
Yep.
Great.
I think then we're done. I think we can clean this up.
Why does 62 thinks it has conflict? I'm gonna check that.
Yeah, I think probably what we can do from here is move on to other topics and
Okay.
yeah.
So one more question. I guess this document is nearly ready, so the next step is actually get approval from the IAB. Do we want to reach out and figure out if we can find one or two other IAB members to do another review, or do we think this already had enough review anyway?
Prior to publishing, or so I guess you're
Yes,
asking about
because
like,
that's the next step, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. But are you asking about like a community review or just an IAB internal review?
So we will put out another call for community feedback anyway, so it should be enough time for reviews if we want to review it. And of course, the IAB will see that this document is on some agenda at some point, so everybody has a chance to look at it. My question is rather, do we want to pick or do we want to find like one or two more people who actually ensures that they will do another in-depth review of the document, or are we fine with the amount of review we had so far?
I think we've gotten a number of good eyes on it from people, particularly in this last kind of call to the list. I'm very happy with the attention we got on it in the reviews. So I think just kind of kicking it through the normal process would be okay from my perspective. I don't know if anyone disagrees.
I don't want to make the process harder. I just want to ensure that the IAB members do something for the money they get. So.
You could always ask the IAB members to make a commitment to review during the comment period.
Exactly. I think that would be.
I mean, for me, it doesn't matter when they review. It's just a question if we want to pick explicitly some people to ensure that we get more review there.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, even just the calls we've had, like I know, like Cullen and other people have already been reading through it and commenting. So
yeah, so there's a bunch of IB members here today. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Okay. Wow. Everything is just merging away. Beautiful. Okay. We can move on from this. So let's see. How do I change sharing? The other thing that was brought forward, and we can talk about this more later too at another venue, but I just wanted to bring it up. Did people see what Charles had proposed here? I don't know, Martin, you're not did other people have a chance to just glance over this?
Yeah, this is one of those interesting things that sort of falls into the cracks often. And I think Charles is suggesting a formalism that maybe isn't necessary, but at the same time, there's a bunch of things that we might want to talk about in this space. I wouldn't publish this document,
right?
But for starting a conversation, it's kind of great, and we should probably have Charles on a call for one of these things.
Yeah, no, and we'll schedule another one. But I guess just to start with the people we have here. I don't know, like how do you, what do you think practically could be done here? You know, I think you could formalize. Oh, here's the way to hook up your GitHub code. How do we think that would actually play out? So, I mean, essentially, how do we replicate some of the good stuff we see with Quick of saying, hey, there are a lot of interoperable implementations that are working on this and get that benefit?
Yeah, so we saw a few weird things with Quick, but we also saw how quickly those things disappear in terms of the high energy event. And during that event, people were very proactive and contributing, and the interop runner was working, and people were actively relying on it. And then people are shipping now, and that thing broke, and no one commented for weeks. And so a lot of these things require a lot of maintenance, and I'm not really sure that we can sort of rely on all of the communities maintaining this sort of thing. Now, maybe that some groups do. I've seen some really good implementation status sections in RFCs and drafts. I think some of those are excellent, but they obviously require a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So we did discuss this point that so the implementation section is supposed to be removed before publication as RFC, because what you said, it's like they outdate very quickly. But on the other hand, if you read an RFC, it would be still very useful even just to have a repo of it with outdated code, like to have like any kind of pointer. So how do we get that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I agree these things go outdated massively quickly. I mean, I remember I did the interop matrix for RTP back in the day when we went to full standard, and you know, I'm not sure any of those implementations are still used these days. And I sort of worry that we'll be pointing to code that's just not that's actively misleading rather than just not useful.
Mm-hmm.
And I also worry slightly that if we're not careful, we'll run into antitrust issues and that sort of thing if we're pointing at particular implementations, rather than indirecting it through some third party that says, you know, there's a community maintained list over here.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the direction that we ended up with.
Code base.
Yeah. Yeah, Quick ended up with that sort of indirection, and I think it's worked out reasonably well. If you look at the wikis that are maintained on Quick or TLS, there's just people make their own contributions to the thing, and it turns out to be useful. I think that's all Charles is really asking for here as well. It's just that there's a little more formalism around the way that it's set up, so that there's standard places you can go to look for these things.
Yeah, I mean, what has changed since publication of 7942 is GitHub, basically. That didn't exist in at least that broadly. There used to be, and like today you can find a lot of things on GitHub. And getting a connection here is the question.
You know, one of the interesting things, you know, obviously, Charles comes from the background of hackathon here, and also, you know, Martin, what you're pointing to is that we have these high energy moments where people are engaged, and that's when this works well. And then eventually, you know, people ship out, and you know, they have other priorities, and they're not going to keep updating these things. I wonder if, you know, to some degree, would it make sense to have these pointers really be to like snapshots that are like how you have in data tracker, you know, like here was a meeting, and then like that was the meeting that happened on this day, and it's kind of expired now. And like here was this interop event, and here's the things that were tested here. You can go look at that snapshot, but maybe it's not as misleading. Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I have two things to say about that. One is that getting the what happened at the hackathon out and kind of clear is actually a lot of work, and I've been involved in quite a few interop events and hackathons, and sometimes you really don't have any idea, and some events have been covered by interesting NDAs, and although in hindsight, I wish I had known about Chatham House rules, right. Because that's actually really what you really want, right? But I'll say this: this is I don't know how to say this loud enough to the right people, because none of them are in the room, right? That if your company thinks that you're going to eventually implement protocol foo, but only after it becomes RFC, then you're going to miss all of the interop events that actually will make you clueful enough to actually implement it properly. And I don't know how to say that loud enough to people. You don't have to ship a product, but you know, that was the case for Ike V2 15 years ago, right? The people that were in that room in Toronto are the people that have products, and the people that weren't in that room, yeah, they still have Ike V1, right? And it can't be said loud enough. I don't know how to do that, but anyway, we had I think that the IETF layer 2 VPN, which hasn't really worked that well yet. But you know, we got close in March, and then we changed the hardware, and now I haven't got it working again myself. But and Charles has heard all about these things. But we actually have a layer 2 discovery protocol in Anima, and so we actually really wanted to use it because we wanted to test that. So we couldn't do that. But being able to run that on an ongoing basis is actually a really, really valuable kind of thing. And the having people leave their systems up is valuable. And also that thing actually, you know, essentially punches through all their corporate firewalls into the lab, right? And they can never get things exposed otherwise. Even if they go to Amazon or whatever, they still can't get the right things exposed to test things.
Oh yeah,
and
that's a huge problem for us testing our quick implementations. Like we can't run an iOS server on the public internet. No.
Well, and you know, and then you have IoT devices where you actually physically need to poke them, you know, with a screwdriver to get them to reset and stuff like this. So I think that's a huge valuable thing. And you know, I read this document a while ago, or you know, like more than a month ago, and I don't remember it very well, but I think that what I'm trying to say is that, as you said, there's this huge, you know, amount of energy, and the trick is to harness that and somehow to get it to persist for a bit longer, right, into things, and make it as cheap as possible for people to persist that. And I think that L2 VPN, I think, is underappreciated at this point. And I hope that it's something we'll think about as a not just because we're virtual, but because we need to do this on an ongoing basis.
Right. Yeah. And also, I imagine to make it a bit more available asynchronously, so that, you know, you don't have to have everyone in the same room for the particular hackathon event. You know, if you leave it up enough, people can.
Well, yeah. So that's part of it. And the thing that worked for us 2 weeks ago was that we only said we were going to be together for an hour at a time at, you know, the typical 10 a.m. Eastern. Yeah. And so that was a minimum amount of disruption to people's time. And we got together and we very clearly, you know, pulled up screen shares to look at log files, right? During that hackathon. We didn't try to do anything else that was, you know, more business or, you know, whatever. We didn't edit IDs. We didn't do anything else. It was just a standing meeting, and that was really valuable. But no one other than me had tried the VPN at that point. So I hope we'll get it working in September.
Martin, you shared a.
Yeah, I shared a link to the original wiki page that we used for tracking TLS implementations. And Chris, in his wisdom, has turned it into a repo, which is not such a terrible thing, but it also raises the bar to contributions, which is an interesting question to ask. Is the wiki, with its ease of access and lowering the bar, as Michael would have it, is that the right way to do things, or, you know, is just the little bit extra of getting it into a repo a problem?
Well, in the GitHub Markdown wiki space, they're the same thing, right? It's a
no, because of the way, but the barriers to contribution. So one of them you have to open a pull request, and the other one you just have to edit the wiki, and there's no permissions. There's no gatekeeper.
Okay, but I see. Right. So I think that once our super duper IETF wiki is going, that will be the right answer.
I do too. I think that's probably the right way to do things. This is functionally equivalent in very many ways, but yeah, I think the key will be just to have a place where you can put this sort of meta information, and that meta information would be a pointer to the wiki page, and then from there you're fine.
And you could actually have a spot in here for if someone has a thing that will respond at an IP address. You could even do that, or contact this person for info. And test servers at the bottom. There we go. Yeah.
Yep. And I think it's also important to note that, you know, there are examples on here that do not have repos behind them that are accessible, but it is still tracking who has done what. And I think there is meta value for a working group and knowing who has what implemented of what status.
Yeah, that's actually, that information there is variously out of date, as you will see. I think I can list a bunch of those that have complete full standard implementations, and probably a lot of those that claim to have draft implementations don't anymore. So that's the classic problem.
Yep. Which is why I think there's something attractive about having these things be snapshots in time explicitly and not claiming that they're up to date.
Yeah, or at least putting a date when they were last updated on.
Yeah.
The good thing is that the wiki tracks that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this list is just having the links to the actual repos of the code.
Right, because as long as those are still accurate, they are the actual sources of truth. Yep, that's good. All right, so yeah, I think we'll set aside some time at a future call. We'll schedule in September, October, so we can have Charles here and talk a bit more about this type of stuff. And then hopefully at that point, we will also have gotten further on publishing Use It or Lose It, and we can talk about. I guess, Martin, do we want to talk about anything for protocol maintenance? Was there anything that needs to be done there before that gets shipped? Or
I think we'll just do one at a time. Thanks. I've got a lot on my plate.
For sure. Cool. Yeah, I don't want to abuse anyone's time more than necessary. All right. I think that's it from what I wanted to cover today. Other people who have thoughts? Eric, did you want to bring up some of the stuff you were talking about earlier?
I don't know. It might play into the. I didn't see an IPv6 hop options reference in it in the document, so I don't know what that was about. But briefly, I've been trying to. We had a presentation in 6man at 111 about, hey, what if we just get everybody to? What if we just get people to commit to parsing the first 128 bytes of a packet, and we will do our level best to make sure that the L4 header is in there somewhere, and with the updated hop by hop, feel free to ignore them guidance. If we actually make that an official update to 8200, then perhaps we can actually make the space in between the IP header and the L4 header useful, and like put in the MTU option. This basically like an MSS rewriting scratch space option. Maybe people could use the connex option so that it's not just 1.5 bits or whatever it is remaining in DSCP. And I mean, Martin is stifling a laugh. I don't know, but like, whatever it is, and maybe allow them to be sent and in various orders, so that there's some level of like they aren't always in the same format or in the same order thing. Then perhaps we could get to a place where like Quick did, where it had it improved its ability to be sent across the internet by use. Since I think where we are, unless we want to deploy another version of IP, is that we need to like not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and focus on deployment of things that are slower, longer, and admittedly less than perfect, but still largely useful. That was
so actually the connex option, as you mentioned, it says if you use it, it has to be the first hop by hop option. So you, I mean, the way we got this through the 6man review is that we promised them to never use it, I guess, but that's what's in the draft, in the RC.
Yeah, so actually I haven't read that in detail, but that very point did come up because the current proposal for a hop by hop option treatment says that routers are required to only process the first hop by hop option in the chain, which would sort of like nullify any sort of future usefulness, unless we made like one mega hop by hop option that had a bunch of other
Contained all the other hub.
contained a bunch of stuff inside of it, to sort of work around that limitation.
Can we put
So
an
I think
IP
there's
packet
obviously
in
a
there
lot.
too?
Sorry, say again, Michael.
Put another IP header in there too.
That's right. You could get 2 packets for the price of 1. It could be bandwidth saving across satellite links. You know, when you have a limited transmission schedule. Anyway, this was this was what I was mentioning to you, Tommy, and had been talking to Warren about. And so I think like some of the right pieces are floating around, and I don't know if they will gel into anything useful or not, but I feel like they could.
It
Yeah,
sounds like you're at the honeymoon phase, and it sounds promising. It's good.
I think it's interesting experimenting. Like, what are going to be all the challenges you face with how ossified things are in deploying?
There are many. I mean, you've got to deploy this thing before it can be relied upon to any reasonable extent. It has to be deployed pretty widely, right?
Well, one of the other things that might be required for this to be of interest, or that could be sufficiently interesting to make it useful, and I think, 2 minutes, is that it might be necessary to do a fragmentation v2 header, where we actually have in the fragment header the L4 header, or some per transport layer specifiable chunk of bytes that might be useful.
Wow.
So yeah, obviously pretty wacky stuff. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing is that you can do the wackiest and most insane things, but if everyone agrees, it's not insane.
No. Yeah. I guess what I'd be curious about, having experience, how we try to get out things like TFO and everything else. So if you tried to do this, what type of heuristics would you need to make it actually work and fall back? Like, how would you know when it's safe to do it or not as an endpoint?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Quick relied upon was, hey, we'll just fall back to TCP.
Right. And so you could always fall back to not doing this once you detect this.
Yeah, but it's going to require a lot more ongoing measurement intelligence in a node to observe things that work and remember them, and observe when like something else in the path changed and note that too.
Right.
It's going to be
your path.
fairly non-trivial.
The tragedy here is that as soon as you define that fallback, basically no one's going to bother. It's going to be the thing everyone uses. So unless it didn't
happen with Quick though.
Well, but I don't. What's happening in enterprises where UDP is commonly blocked, right? So at that level, they're not even deploying TLS 1.3 a lot of the time for this reasons, right?
Yeah, and I wonder if one of the principles here is like Quick's original breakage wasn't that bad. Like, it didn't have to fall back to TCP. Like, what it was maybe above 10% initially or something, but it was not the majority of cases. And so maybe it's different to say, all right, I'm broken 20% of the time, but 80% of the time I work. Therefore, it's good enough and I can fall back for the 20%. But if you're starting the other way and you only work 20% of the time, it may have a very different way it plays out.
But think of it from a project manager deciding what code to do, right? Oh, we're at the end. Yeah,
we're at the end.
Where am I going to fix bugs? And the answer is, well, the part that's 80%, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so then you're going to rip out the 20% when it's buggy, whichever one that is.
Right.
Okay,
right.
That's too buggy. Forget it. The other one's working, and that's where I think we run into problems, right? If you're right. Anyway.
Cool.
Well, this is where I worry about the perfect being the enemy of the good kind of thing. Yeah. Is there are many things that are good enough for lots of good situations, but knowing when and just how are obviously our charter questions.
All right. Well, even though Martin your meeting to get moved, I think we will wrap up this session. Thank you all for chatting, and Miri, I guess we will just kick off. Well, I guess we'll rev user lose it one more time, and then we'll kick the process off. All right.
Yeah. There's one more pull request sitting there.
Yeah,
if you have time to look at that, it's big, so I don't need to take it, but I'd like your opinion on.
All right, I'll check it before the end of the day today.
Oh, thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
I will attempt this stop recording thing.